They say everyone deserves a second chance, but some men never even had the first. Deep inside a prison in Alabama, an old man named William awaits the dawn that will mark the end of his life. For decades, he claimed his innocence. For decades, no one listened. Now, just hours away from the electric chair, he decides to break the silence. With a tired yet steady voice, William records his final words, not to ask for mercy, but to make sure the truth is heard before the world erases him forever. What he revealed seconds before his death shocked the world.
My name is William Carter, and what's left of me has been living behind these walls for 32 years. I was born in Montgomery, Alabama, at a time when being poor and black was almost the same as being born guilty. My childhood was simple, maybe even happy, between dirt roads, church bells on Sundays, and the smell of coffee my mother made before sunrise. She used to say the world was a hard place, but kindness could open paths even through despair. I believed that for a long time. I grew up thinking that being honest, working hard, and treating people with respect was enough. I spent years lifting boxes at the docks, fixing fences, taking odd jobs to survive. I was never rich, but I had something worth more than money, the feeling of freedom. I could walk down the streets with my head high, feel the warm Alabama wind on my face, and know that somehow I still had a choice. But in here, there's no wind, no freedom, no choice. The only thing that moves is the clock outside. And it doesn't mark time like the others. It marks the distance between me and death. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, staring at the cracked ceiling, imagining what it would be like to still be home, sitting on the porch, listening to Grace humming the songs she used to make up. The sound of her voice was the only place where the world still felt fair. Time passed, and with it came forgetting. Faces changed, names faded, promises lost their meaning. And here, I learned that silence speaks louder than any word. Every man who walks this corridor carries his own sentence inside his chest. And mine is knowing that I'm paying for something I never did. They say the heart hardens with time, but mine didn't. Mine gets tired, it bleeds inside, and it still insists on remembering everything. Grace's laughter, the smell of rain on hot asphalt, the friends who disappeared when the world turned its back. And most of all, the night my life changed forever. The night they turned me into the killer I never was. Even now, I sometimes find myself talking to the walls, as if my voice could reach someone beyond them. Maybe it's madness, or maybe it's faith, tired, broken, but still alive. I speak because I believe that if my words reach out there, maybe someone will finally see that behind the condemned man. There was once a man who loved, who dreamed, and who now waits for the dawn, the last dawn of his life. Today is my last day. The sun hasn't even risen yet, but I can already feel the weight of the hours crushing my chest. There's a strange silence this morning, different from every other day I've lived in here. The guard's footsteps sound slower, the doors creak softer, as if even the iron knows it's the end. And I just breathe, trying to give meaning to this air that enters and leaves me for the last time. Death row has its own sound, the sound of waiting. You learn to recognize the jingle of keys, the drag of boots, the ticking of a clock that seems to mock your forced calm. But today, everything feels distant, as if time itself has grown tired of chasing me. No screams, no voices, only the sound of my heart, slow like an old drum about to stop beating. I thought I would feel fear, but what I feel is something else, a kind of emptiness, silence within silence. I spent so many years trying to prove I was innocent that I forgot what it was like to live without fighting. Now that there's nothing left to prove, all I can do is remember. Remember who I was, what I loved, and what was left behind when they put these chains on me. They say death is the end of pain. But what they don't know is that for the innocent, pain dies long before the body does. It dies every day you're forgotten, every letter that never comes, every sunset seen through bars. Physical death is just the last chapter of a book the world wrote for you, without ever listening to your side. Today, as I look at my trembling hands, I think of how many times I worked with them, how many times they touched Grace's face, how many times I prayed with my fingers entwined, asking God to let me wake up from this nightmare. But the nightmare never ended. It just changed shape. Now it has a schedule, witnesses, and a button that, when pressed, will silence what's left of me. Still, something inside me refuses to die. Maybe it's pride. Maybe it's faith. I don't know. But there's something about knowing that my last words will be heard, even if by few, even if by those who doubt. And if someone out there listens with an open heart, maybe they'll understand that a man can die and still be right. The clock keeps ticking, and every second sounds like goodbye. But for the first time in a long while, I don't feel anger. I feel peace, because I finally accepted that it's not me who dies today. It's the injustice that will carry my name with it. And somehow, that's enough for me. When I close my eyes, I can still smell the wet earth after the rain back in the small neighborhood where I grew up, Mobile, Alabama. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where time moved slowly and children ran barefoot without fear. My mother, Evelyn Carter, was a woman of unshakable faith. She taught me to pray before meals, to respect my elders, and above all, to never let hatred turn me into someone I wasn't. My father, Robert, didn't talk much, but when he did, his words carried weight. He was a simple, hard-working man, spending his days hauling wood and coming home with a tired body but peaceful eyes. Our house was small, 2 windows, a crooked porch, and a table always filled with stories. Nights were for laughter and talk, even when money was short. Life was never easy, but it was honest, and I grew up believing that was enough. I learned to fix things, to work with my hands, and to find beauty in small victories. Maybe that's why I always believed in justice, because where I came from, right was right, even when no one was watching. I remember when my younger brother, Samuel, and I used to climb onto rooftops just to watch the sunset. He always said the Alabama sky looked bigger, as if God had left a piece of it open just for us to dream. And maybe he was right, because back then, before everything fell apart, I truly believed the world was good. Innocence has that gift, to make you believe that nothing bad can touch you as long as you have faith. But time, that cruel old teacher, shows you that not every good man meets goodness along the way. As the years went by, poverty grew heavier. My father got sick, and I had to quit school to work. That's when I began to understand what my mother meant when she said, "The world doesn't always reward what's right, son, but God always sees." Those words never left me, not even here, among bars and shadows. Back then, laughter was pure and fear was small. Today, fear is all I have left. But sometimes, when the wind slips through the window of my cell and touches my face, I close my eyes and become that boy from Mobile again. Feet muddy, heart clean. And for an instant, for a brief, merciful instant, the world feels good once more. Before everything fell apart, I had a simple life. But it was mine. I lived in a small house in Montgomery, with a backyard full of flowers that Grace cared for with such devotion. She used to say each flower was like a prayer, and maybe it was, because that place felt blessed. Every morning, before I left for work, I'd see her kneeling in the dirt, hands covered in soil, wearing the purest smile this world has ever known. She didn't have to say anything, just one look, and I knew I was exactly where I belonged. I worked as a mechanic at a small garage on the corner of the main street. It was honest, heavy work, but it made me proud. I liked the smell of oil mixed with the sound of engines. It reminded me that somehow I was part of something useful. The neighbors called me Will, and whenever someone's car broke down, they came straight to me. Life wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful, and every sunset felt like a quiet reminder that God was still watching over us. Grace was a teacher at the local school. The children adored her. She had a rare gift, the ability to see goodness, even where no one else could. When I came home tired, she'd welcome me with that same smile that had never learned what despair meant. We often ate dinner in silence, not because we had nothing to say, but because silence between us was comfortable. There was love there. The kind that doesn't need words, only presence. On Sundays we went to church. I wore the same old white shirt, and Grace brought a piece of cake to share with the neighbors. After the service, we'd walk hand in hand through the square, talking about the future we imagined. We dreamed of having children, maybe moving to a bigger house, or even opening our own garage one day. I believed in that. I believed in a simple, honest future. And that faith, that innocence, was the hardest thing to lose. I remember one night in particular. We were on the porch, the radio playing softly, and the wind moving slow. Grace rested her head on my shoulder and said, "Have you ever noticed how the world feels calmer when you truly love someone?" In that moment, I was sure that nothing could ever come between us. But fate has a cruel way of testing even the purest certainties. If only I had known what was coming. If only I had known that would be the last peaceful night of my life. I would have stayed there forever, holding her hand, listening to the crickets, smelling the coffee drifting from the kitchen. But life doesn't warn you when it's about to change. It just does. And when it does, it takes everything you were, until only emptiness remains. The next morning, the sun rose the same way it always did. But the world was no longer the same. I just didn't know yet that my life was about to be destroyed by a crime I never committed. It was a hot summer night, the kind that makes the air heavy and still. The streets of Montgomery were nearly empty, the silence broken only by the faint buzz of the streetlights. I remember the kitchen clock showing 10:20 when the wailing of sirens cut through the air. I was having dinner with Grace talking about the day, when the sound made her stop mid-laughter. Moments later, a neighbor came running to the gate, pale, shaking. A young woman had been found dead in an alley, just 4 blocks away. That night, my name wasn't mentioned once, but by morning, everything changed. A man told police he'd seen someone who looked like me walking down the street before the murder. That one vague sentence was all it took. Hours later, an officer claimed to have found an old glove, stained with grease, near the crime scene. a mechanic's glove, and by cruel coincidence, I was one. The next day I was in the garage, bent over an old car engine, when I felt the cold steel of a gun press against my neck. "William Carter, you're under arrest." Those words split the world in two. I asked why, thinking there had to be a mistake, but they only said, "You know why." I didn't, but it didn't matter. They dragged me out in front of everyone, hands cuffed, eyes staring. Grace ran out crying, but a cop shoved her aside. We both shouted that I was innocent, but the truth had already lost its voice. They had a glove and a greasy footprint found near the alley. "Matches the kind of boots used by mechanics," they said. No test, no certainty. But who needs proof when the accused fits the picture? At the station, they kept me under blinding lights for hours, throwing photos in my face, the glove, the footprint, the body. They said they'd found traces of oil near the blood, possibly from a worker's hand. Everything was possibly, everything was similar, but possibly was all they needed. When I asked for a lawyer, they laughed. When I cried, they called it acting. When I shouted, they wrote, "Shows signs of aggression." The victim was Emily Dawson, daughter of a powerful businessman. Young, white, beautiful, a tragedy that demanded a face to blame. And my face was the perfect one. The press got there before the truth ever could. By noon, headlines read, "Local mechanic arrested for brutal murder." Grace fought for me. She begged lawyers, spoke to reporters, pleaded for anyone to listen. But no one wanted to hear the wife of a killer. A journalist even called her emotionally compromised. The neighbors stopped looking at her. The friendly mechanic became the monster next door. In court, they showed the glove and the photo of the footprint as if they were sacred relics. No DNA, no fingerprints, no witness. But the prosecutor spoke with such confidence that even lies started sounding like truth. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, "this man is a predator, and our daughters will never be safe while he breathes the same air." Grace sobbed in the front row. My public defender barely met my eyes. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I whispered, "I didn't do it. I could never do that." But no one listened. The verdict came fast, cold, final. Guilty. When the gavel struck, it sounded like a bullet in my head. That was the moment I learned that truth means nothing when the world has already chosen the lie it prefers to believe. And from that day on, I've carried not just these chains, but the weight of a crime built on grease, footprints, and the hunger to find someone to blame. They say prison begins with the body, but the real cell is built inside the mind. The day they locked me up for the first time, I still believed justice existed. I thought that in a few days everything would be cleared up, that the evidence would fall apart, that someone would see the mistake. But time taught me what it means to be forgotten. And being forgotten is to die slowly. The first night was hell made of silence. The cell smelled of rust and despair. The mattress was thin, the air heavy, and the cold crept up from the floor like a warning. You're not getting out. The screams of other inmates echoed through the halls. Some cried, some prayed, and others laughed, as if laughter was the last piece of freedom they had. I stayed quiet, trying to understand how an innocent man could be thrown in there like trash. The days that followed blended together. I was questioned more times than I can count. They wanted me to confess, not for truth, but for convenience. One officer, a tall man with hollow eyes, once said to me, "Just admit it, William. It'll be easier for everyone." And I said, "Not for me." He smiled, then slapped me so hard I tasted blood for days. Grace came to visit me 3 times before the trial. Each visit felt like both a blessing and a curse. She tried to smile, but fear lived in her eyes. She had deep circles under them, her hands trembling as they touched the glass that separated us. "I believe you," she said. And for a moment, I believed too. The trial began 3 months later. The courtroom was full. Reporters, strangers, people who didn't even know my name before all this. The prosecutor walked with the confidence of a man performing a play he had already rehearsed. The glove and the footprint were displayed again like holy relics. A witness, someone I had never seen, claimed he thought he saw me near the scene. The prosecutor smiled, the jury nodded, and I realized it wasn't the crime they were judging. It was me. Guilty. The word fell sharp and cold. I looked at the judge, but he didn't look back. I looked at Grace, and I saw the moment her world collapsed. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The guards dragged her away while I was led back in chains. I'll never forget the sound of her crying down that hallway, the most painful sound I've ever heard. After that, time lost its meaning. Days turned into years, years turned into dust. The system doesn't make mistakes, or so they say, and when it does, it hides behind silence. I became a number, a closed case, a convenient statistic. But what no one understands is that the worst punishment isn't death row, it's waiting. Waiting eats you alive. You count footsteps, seconds, heartbeats. You watch faces come and go, life moving on outside, and all that's left is the sound of doors closing behind you. And every night, before I fall asleep, I whisper the same thought. One day someone will listen. One day someone will believe. But the days turned into decades, and the only thing still alive is my hope that the truth will someday speak louder than the lies that buried me here. They say time heals everything, but whoever said that never lived in a place where time doesn't move. It rots. The years passed like repeating shadows. Faces changed, guards grew old, paint peeled from the walls. But I stayed here, sitting in the same chair, listening to the same sound of doors closing. On death row, every sunrise is irony. You wake up, but you don't live. It's as if God lets you breathe only to remind you that it's not over yet. In the first few years, I counted the days. I carved lines into the wall, believing one of them would be the last before my freedom. Then I stopped. When you realize no one's coming to open the door, days lose their meaning. The food comes cold. The air smells like rust and mold, and the only constant sound is the ticking of a clock, just to make you feel time hurting. I met many men here, some guilty, others as innocent as I am, all with the same empty stare, as if they'd died inside long before their bodies gave up. There was one, named Leroy, who used to say every night, "The worst part of the electric chair ain't the current, it's the waiting." He was executed in 1998. He said the same words the night before and smiled at me before he went. I never forgot that smile. The smile of a man who'd already made peace with the inevitable. Others just vanished. One day they were here, the next day their cells were empty. The silence that follows someone's death is different. Heavier, colder. It feels like the air itself mourns. And as the years passed, I learned that here, death doesn't come. It waits. I got letters at first, from Grace. She said she still believed, that she was fighting, that she wouldn't give up. But the letters came less often, once a month, then once a year, until they stopped. The last one said only, "I love you, Will, Be strong wherever you are. That's when I knew she was sick. A few days later, a guard told me Grace had passed. And that day, for the first time, I wanted to die. After that, time stopped being my enemy and became my companion. The ticking clock became a voice. The shadows became faces. The sound of the wind through the bars became a prayer. I learned to talk to the silence, and it answered me with something life outside never gave me: peace. Now, when I look at my trembling, wrinkled hands, I see the portrait of waiting. They no longer have the strength to fight, but they still remember how to pray. And maybe that's what keeps me standing. The stubborn faith that someday someone will look at this old prisoner and see the man he once was, not the monster they made him out to be. No pain is as silent as the pain of those who love someone condemned. In here, we suffer out loud, but out there, they suffer in the dark, quietly, trying to live in a world that started pointing fingers at them too. My mother, Evelyn, never recovered. She grew old overnight. I remember the last time I saw her, her frail hands clutching a Bible against her chest, her tired eyes full of tears. She looked at me through the glass and said, "My son, God knows the truth, and if the world refuses to see it, he will." Her voice had lost its strength, but not her faith. A few months later, I was told her heart had stopped, and somehow I knew part of mine had stopped too. My brother Samuel tried to move on, but my name followed him everywhere. He lost his job, was asked to leave the church we grew up in, and eventually moved to another state. For a while, he wrote to me. He said he still dreamed of seeing me free, that he kept newspaper clippings waiting for the day the truth would come out. But the letters grew fewer, and then they stopped. Silence took their place. Now I don't even know if he's still alive. Maybe he is, maybe not. Life out there moves forward, even when ours stops. And Grace, sweet, brave Grace, the woman who believed in me until her final breath. She was humiliated, insulted, called delusional. They said she was in denial, that she was married to a murderer. But she never abandoned me. She faced the world with the same calm eyes she had when planting flowers in our yard. She said every flower that bloomed was proof that love could still grow, even in the driest soil. And with that faith, she held on until the end. When I learned she was gone, something inside me went dark. A guard told me like it was nothing, just another note on his clipboard. But to me, it was the end of everything that still kept me alive. I sat on the floor of my cell all night, staring into nothing, imagining her smiling one last time. The next morning, I asked to go to the prison chapel. I knelt and whispered the only prayer I could form. If love is eternal, Lord, please let her wait for me on the other side. After she passed, no one came to visit. The cell grew colder, the silence louder, and in that emptiness, I understood. The pain of the family is the cruelest punishment of all, because it doesn't end when the sentence is read. It keeps echoing day after day, generation after generation, until everyone who ever loved you learns how to live with the shadow of your name. Sometimes I still dream of them. I dream I'm home again, on the porch, hearing Grace's laughter and my mother calling from the kitchen. And in those dreams, for a few seconds, I'm not a prisoner. I'm just a man who loved and was loved. There's a kind of pain that no test can detect, no scar can show. The pain of being accused of something you never did. It settles deep in your chest and eats at your soul in silence, day after day, until a man stops being a man and becomes just a number with a story no one cares to hear. Over 30 years, I've lived under the label of murderer. 30 years hearing the same echo bounce off the walls. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And every time I heard that word, I felt the weight of the whole world on my shoulders. Not because of the crime, but because of the lie. Because there's nothing crueler than being condemned by someone else's imagination. The system calls it human error. But when an error destroys a life, it stops being an error. It becomes a sin. And that sin doesn't belong only to the man who points the finger, but also to everyone who turns away to avoid seeing the truth. For a long time I asked myself why. Why did God let this happen? Why did the truth get locked up with me? But over time, I began to understand. Maybe the purpose wasn't punishment. Maybe it was testimony. Maybe I was left here to remind the world of what it tries so hard to forget. That the justice of men is not the justice of God. The guards changed, the lawyers died, politicians made their promises, but death row stayed the same. The same cold floor, the same cracked walls, the same echo of loneliness, and I remain the same man who once believed that doing right was enough. Now I know that sometimes doing right is just the beginning of the fall. Some nights I imagine the prosecutor sleeping peacefully, thinking he did his job. I imagine the jurors living their lives, raising children, growing old in peace. And I wonder how many times they've forgotten my name, while I've never forgotten theirs. It's strange, because in the end, I don't feel hate. I feel pity. Pity for a world that needs to destroy an innocent man to feel safe. Some men lose their faith in prison. I almost lost mine. But every time I came close, one memory held me back. My mother's face, Grace's voice, my brother's smile when we were boys. Those memories are my resistance, my way of staying human in a place built to kill everything human. Injustice is an invisible weight, but a constant one. It's not in the chains. It's in the eyes of those who judge without knowing you. It's in the silence of those who could have defended you but chose not to. It's in the hands that pull the trigger of condemnation and then wash themselves clean. Now, with the end so close, I realize the justice I sought out there may have never existed. But in here, among walls and memories, I found another. The kind that comes when a man accepts that the world can lie. But God never does. And maybe that's the only truth I have left. The last night begins before sunset. You can feel the day leaving early, as if it doesn't want to witness what comes next. Footsteps down the hall turn softer, voices lower. No one wants to be remembered by the sound that precedes an ending. They gave me a meal. They call it last, as if anything has flavor when tomorrow doesn't exist. I chose simple things: warm bread, beans, a sip of coffee. While I ate, I thought of Grace stirring a pot, my mother swearing coffee cures almost anything, my brother laughing at nothing. I ate slowly, not from hunger, but from memory. Every bite was a goodbye to someone. They brought paper and a pen. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the urgency of saying so much in so little space. I wrote to those who are gone and to those who may never read a word. I said I tried to be dignified when dignity was denied to me, that I refused to hate when hate was offered, that, in the end, I still believe truth finds its own roads. I folded the letters and felt I was folding, with them, a piece of life I finally learned to release. The chaplain arrived in silence. He sat beside me and asked nothing. Faith is sometimes only presence. We prayed without haste. I asked for little: peace for those who remain, mercy for those who wronged me, courage to cross the last door without shame for the man I became. He squeezed my hands and said, "God sees what eyes refuse." Night slid down the walls like cold water. I heard the familiar sounds: chain on a gate, metal against metal, the clock that always mocked me. But there was something new. a quiet I never learned in books or sermons. It was a gentle acceptance, not surrender. Like the sea that keeps striking rock and still remembers it was made to move on. Then came instructions, formalities, technical words recited as if reading the manual of something broken. They asked me to stand. I walked. My feet, so tired, knew the way without my help. The hallway felt longer, but it didn't hurt. I glanced once more at the walls. They held the laughter of men who clung to hope and the echoes of those who left without goodbye. In the prep room, they cut some of my hair, shaved my leg. They said contact, conductor, procedure. I thought simpler words: skin, bone, life. I didn't argue. Some battles end when the first gate shuts. Letting them strap me down wasn't humiliation. It was choice. The only one left to me, to cross this with calm. I felt leather on my wrists, the weight of belts across my chest, the wood beneath my back. I closed my eyes and searched for the porch at home, for the flower Grace planted, for my mother's voice. I found them. I stayed there on the inside while, on the outside, they adjusted cables, checked numbers, filled in forms. They asked me to confirm my name. I spoke it, not for them, for me. To remember that before all this, there was a boy from Mobile, a husband in Montgomery, a man who fixed engines and believed in what's right. I drew a deep breath. The room was cold, but for the first time in years I wasn't. The last night isn't a shadow swallowing you. It's a candle going out slowly. And in the instant the flame trembles, you learn darkness doesn't win. It only occupies the space light chooses to leave. I held the light that was mine, the love I gave, the innocence I kept, the peace I fought to learn. When they opened the inner door, I had already gone where I needed to. The rest was only the walk. They told me I could say something before the end. Some use this moment to ask for forgiveness, others to curse the world. I chose only to speak the truth that time tried to bury but couldn't. I am not innocent of everything, but I am innocent of what killed me. I've made mistakes, like any man, but I never took anyone's life. It was mine they took, slowly, quietly, with a gavel and a verdict. For years I waited to be heard. I waited for truth to shout louder than the headlines. But the world is deaf to those without power. And still, I believed. Because believing was the only freedom they could never take from me. If anyone ever hears this, I want you to know. I hate no one. Not the ones who lied, not the ones who turned away, not even the ones pressing the buttons that will end my life. Hate is a prison bigger than this one, and I've spent enough time behind bars. I think of Grace, how she used to say that love is what's left when everything else is gone. Now I understand. Love is the only thing that passes through walls, verdicts, and death. It's what carries me in peace. Injustice tried to kill me. But truth, even late, makes me eternal. Because truth doesn't need a body. It lives in those who listen. If there's someone out there, someone who still believes a man can be condemned by mistake, then let my voice remind you. Justice that kills the innocent is not justice. It's revenge. Tonight, I don't ask for salvation. I ask only that when the world hears the sound that silences me, it also hears the echo I leave behind. Proof that the soul of an innocent man can be silenced, but never erased. My name is William Carter, and these were my last words.
That night, when the lights went out in Montgomery, the world lost another man, not to guilt but to haste. An entire system sighed in relief as it rid itself of a body. never realizing it had just killed the truth. The name William Carter was never cleared. The papers kept calling him a murderer. The headlines never changed, and people, as they always do, moved on. But among the guards there was one, just one, who swore he saw a tear roll down William's face before silence filled the room. He said it wasn't fear, it was peace. Months later, a new forensic test revealed what he had always said. The footprints didn't match, the glove carried no trace of his DNA, and the partial print they used as proof was never his. But it was too late. The truth had come, just not in time to save him. Still, William won. Because there is something the electric chair cannot burn, the truth. It lingers in the air, travels through years, through walls, through generations. It lives in the voices that tell his story, in the eyes of those who question certainty, in the hearts that refuse to believe justice never fails. Today, when someone asks who William Carter was, the answer isn't in the court records. It's in the words he left behind, in the love that endured, in the faith that never wavered, in the dignity that followed him to the end. Because in the end, death doesn't silence the innocent, it only turns them into echoes. And that echo is what you just heard.